safe for the next 5 days and setting him up to unleash his devastating form in the individual time trial on Saturday.
2 other Americans are leading their teams to Paris. Gerolsteiner's Levi Leipheimer told me earlier in the tour that he wanted to finish in Paris in the top 5, and he is in great position to do so. Floyd Landis on Team Phonak sits behind Leipheimer in the GC overall at the moment, but is within striking distance. Now, I talked with Team Phonak earlier this morning. They said they are confident that Landis can make up a lot of time during the individual time trial stage 20. Most importantly, Landis has the resume to back it up. He has looked at the course. He says he likes what he sees and thinks it will be in his favor.
I think Craig Kummer said it best, and really you could have said this after stage 1. Everything is going according to Lance's plan. So whose day is important today? Pick somebody, Phil, that you're going to keep an eye on, that this is important for personal gain or personal goals.
Well, it's important for Michael Rasmussen because he's a rider who really, if the time gap remains, I think Ulrich will take him out in the time trial. And because Ulrich will ride a better time trial than Michael. Michael was almost last in the stage 1 time trial.
Now, Paul, we've been fascinated by the battle for the green jersey. Is this a day where the sprinters can make a mark, or do these big mountain climbs disrupt their flow?
Well, actually, I think the climbs are just a little bit too difficult for most of the sprinters. I think Thor Hushovd is a heavier set rider. He'll have difficulty with the Col de l'Aubisque. I do think, though, that Robbie McEwen will also be probably in the bus at the back, but it depends how they ride the stage. My tip is that Stuart O'Grady might just get dropped on the Obisque and catch up before the end, because the great Sean Kelly actually won here, a stage that had been over the same mountain. So I think O'Grady will be looking for points in the green jersey competition.
It's a bit feisty today. This was not the picking segment. That's coming up. All right, Levi Leipheimer, Floyd Landis. They're a little bit on the fringe of the top 5. What do they have to do today to change that?
Well, Floyd can wait for the time trial, and Levi is a great time trials as well, and I think maybe the top 5 is a little bit beyond their grasp. It's so competitive, the top 10, every single guy fighting for his position. Of course, Lance remaining supreme throughout these 7 tours now, but look for Floyd and Levi to be stars of the future.
We'll take a break on the Saab pre-race show, getting you set for stage 16. When we come back, we'll have a stage profile. Then I do believe, Mr. Sherwen, the organized chaos that is the Saab performance predictions. Welcome back to the Saab Tour pre-race show. Depending on which direction you're going, Pau can either be the exit from or the entrance to the Pyrenees. Today, it's the finish line. And we'll be meandering around town today, waiting for the arrival of the peloton. Let's waste no further time by getting to a stage profile of stage 16 with Paul.
I tell you what, Al, I think a lot of the guys will be looking from the top of the Obisque to see if they can see the Eiffel Tower on the finish, because that's what they will very much be thinking. Well, the map brought to us here by Mitchum, and we can see right at the bottom of the map there on the Spanish border still the riders looking at today's stage. We move away from the small town of Marennes all the way to Pau. Unfortunately, from start to finish is only about 20 kilometers, but the riders are not going to take that. As you can see, what they will look for is the Col de Marie Blanc. Not a very high climb, but a very difficult one. Then the last high spot of this year's tour, the Col de l'Aubisque, before charging down towards the finishing line in Pau. But if we look at the profile, it's right in the middle part of the course there that it's very difficult. The advantage for any sprinters is it's 80 kilometers from the top of the Col de l'Aubisque all the way down to the finish. Here are the AMD facts. The distance, 180 kilometers, 112 miles, is roughly the same distance as Richmond, Virginia to Washington, D.C. And the last time the race came down here in 2002, the winner on that occasion was the Crédit Agricole rider Patrice Algon.
All right, Paul, I have no personal knowledge of this any longer, but as you well know, if you go up into the mountains and it's windy, your hair can become disorganized chaos. With that thought, let's go to Frankie Andreu and Chris Carmichael.
I'm here with Chris Carmichael, and we're standing here on one of the last consecutive mountain stages. And Chris, the riders, I'm sure, are feeling a lot of fatigue. What do you expect for today?
Well, this is one of the last stages that the climbers have an opportunity to possibly take the stage. So I expect to see these guys really going for it today.
And for Lance Armstrong, I mean, there's a huge training focus on being able to get ready for consecutive days. What's the schedule to get him prepared for that?
Well, what we do is we do a lot of mountain training camps for Lance, and it consists of about 4 to 5 days of riding in the mountains, consecutive back-to-back riding. Training volume is 3 to 7 hours, sometimes 8 hours in length. Riding 3 to 4, sometimes 5 mountain passes in a single day. The early climbs in a day's training will be ridden at a moderate tempo, then kind of picking up the pace towards the end of the training workout. And what he does is try to work at the same sort of wattage towards the end of the climb like he would in the race.
Well, I'm sure Lance can be pretty happy not to have to train in the mountains anymore. And you know what, Chris? You might be out of a job now.
Oh, no.
He seems really scared. I think his future is fine.
Actually, I think the ultimate challenge for Chris Carmichael is to see whether he can make Bob and myself into climbers with all that technical jazz that he's given us.
It's not going to be easy. Neither is picking who's going to win a stage, as we'll find out in this edition of Saab Performance Predictions, otherwise known as the race for the OLN yellow jersey. Did anybody get anything last stage? No.
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 That was a tough one. I mean, George Hincapie, Paul Sherwen still tied with Phil Liggett, and I've got 13 and Bob Roll's got 1. Let's get to the picks. Paul.
Difficult day, you know, because nobody really knows how the race is going to unfold. I'll stick with Stuart O'Grady because I think he just might get over the climb, the Col de l'Aubisque, and pull himself back for the sprint down towards the end because it's only an average mountain stage.
No chance.
I am finally going to get on board the Robbie McEwen train. I think they've got enough time, Lotto does, to get him another shot, and he has been unstoppable lately.
You cannot boogie with the boogeyman on today's stage. Michael Boogert from Rabobank going to continue their streak. They won a couple stages already. He was almost there on the big mountain de Plata Day. Watch for my man to win one. Get some more points.
Everybody has a bad day in the Tour de France. I'm about to have mine because I picked Thor Hushoff as the winner, and he's got no chance either.
Well, there you have it. We'll have another ceremonial presentation of our Maillot Jaune tomorrow. We'll get you set for racing. We're all set to go for stage 16 here on OLN. This is the 2005 Tour de France.
The final day in the Pyrenees, the last genuine opportunity to look into the eyes of your opponents and attack. If you want to gain major time, you'd better do it today. For Lance Armstrong, this stage is a dangerous one. For his rivals, it's all about nerve. Do they have the strength and the cunning to successfully escape the Texans' grasp, or will the sprinters have a final say? Stage 16 begins the drive towards Paris. The 2005 Tour de France is next on OLN.
The sun just keeps on shining as we now turn our back today on the big mountains that separate France from Spain. We're heading to Pau. Depending on which way you're going, it's the exit or the gateway to the mountains. This time around, it's the exit, and the riders won't be unhappy about that. The sun just keeps on shining. It's a beautiful day, and we can all now reflect on Lance Armstrong in yellow. There we are in our little house, the engine room for the day. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our coverage here on OLN. Phil Liggett with Paul Sherwen. We're now on stage number 16. We're set fair for Paris, and Lance is looking good.
He's looking good, but you know it's going to be a very precarious couple of days because there's a lot of good racing roads that we're going to go over. They're not flat roads on the way up through the middle of the country before we get to Paris, and there will be lots of attacks still to come.
All right, let's show you the highlight package first of all, how it's all evolved today, because the riders are on the Aubisque as I speak. We'll be going there straight away. Lance all smiles this morning, pretty happy. Soon after the start, though, an attack by 11 men, and at the first sprint of Bido, it was Philippe Gilbert leading over Ludovic Turpin, Juan Antonio Fletcher. 11 riders clear already. Onto the climb of the Col d'Icher after 50 kilometres. Now Jérôme Pinot ahead of Ludwig and Chris Horner. Yes, he's in the breakaway.
Well, Chris Horner looking for a move again here in the Pyrenees. He's had a fabulous Tour de France for his first attempt, but so too has Alexander Vinokourov. Not afraid of anybody's reputation in this Tour de France, and probably a little bit saddened by his 8th place in the overall classification. This attack didn't work out, but it was not a very good day either for Andrei Kishaykin, the other Ukrainian rider at the front there, because one of the banners, somebody applauding at the side of the road, caught him right on the nose.
And I've never seen this in my life before, but he crossed the front of the peloton and rode backwards. That is very strictly against the rules here. On the Marie Blanc is the climb, and Kishaykin at the doctor's car there, and they plugged his nose because it was bleeding quite badly at the time.
Oscar Pereiro is at it again, launching an attack from the peloton, unconcerned by Armstrong. And Pereiro is still clear in a chasing group as they head up over the top of the climb of the Marie Blanc. 110 kilometers to go in the breakaway. Ludwig ahead of Anthony Geslin and Xavier Zandio in third. The breakaway all together up there. This is the Eddie Mazzolini. He's also now in a small chase group of 4 riders trying to get on contact. Up came Lance Armstrong, and interestingly, behind there, Michael Rasmussen didn't bother to go for the point, so he must feel pretty confident in the King of the Mountains competition. And guess what? Moments ago, Alexander Vinokourov in the thick of the attacks again. So that's the race situation. We're now going to join the live action here on the climb of the Obisque. This is Alexander Vinokourov. We have a breakaway of 10 riders. Freddy Rodriguez, who was in the breakaway, dropped on the lower slopes, is now being joined by Serrano, Pereiro, Mazzolini. The peloton last timed at 7 minutes and 15 seconds. Let's settle down now for the last big climb of this year's Tour de France. Looking at the chasers here at the moment, it's been a very, very good race, Paul. 47 kilometers covered in the opening hour. It's going to slow down now. We're on the climb here of the Col d'Aubisque. And at the moment, 10 riders are clear. And Cadel Evans, the Australian, best placed, 11th overall this morning, 12 minutes 57 back.
Well, you know, a move by Cadel Evans today, if he can conserve 5 or 6 minutes before the end of today's stage, he could see himself climbing up into 5th place in the overall classification, and that would be a great performance by him. Looks like Laszlo Bodrogi here having a hard time. A lot of riders really surprised, I think, by the pace. Many people looking at this final stage in the mountains as one that they thought would be tackled easily, but that's certainly not the case.
Well, over the rest day, 2 riders, by the way, didn't start today. Bagstedt just getting inside the time limit at the Plat d'Aix by a minute, but decided not to come out today. 156 riders are still in the race from the 189. 4 of the team still have all 9 men. The other non-starter today, Gianluca Bortolami of the Lampre team. They only got 5 men left in that squad.
Yeah, there's not many people at the dinner table in the evening, but certainly this looks a little bit like Roberto Heras trying to falsify his company with the main field as well. He's had a very quiet Tour de France this year. He had the hopes of Spain on his shoulders, but he wasn't able to live up to that climbing ability that made him one of Lance Armstrong's dedicated lieutenants for a number of years.
Well, we're on the climb of the Col d'Aubisque. It is again a beautiful day, and the riders don't know how lucky they are, because, Paul, when you've ridden on the Col d'Aubisque in the past, you've been in dense cloud.
Well, the thing is about the Pyrenees, it can change quite dramatically. Actually, yesterday was not very beautiful at the start of the rest day, because the clouds were very much over the summits of the Pyrenean high spots. But today, there is hardly a cloud in the sky, and these riders are enjoying a very nice day of racing in great climatic conditions.
Well, these are the counter moves. Armstrong is not going to raise a pedal in anger for somebody like Heras began to shake him, because they're too far behind overall. And remember a man by the name of Thomas Voigtler last year, who at one stage got within 22 seconds ahead of Armstrong towards the end of his reign of 10 days in yellow. Well, now he is over 3 hours behind him in the classification.
Well, putting that into perspective, that in fact is around about 120 kilometers or 75 miles. He's 75 miles behind Lance Armstrong if these stages were put back to back.
It's amazing what a difference a year makes. It doesn't seem to make any difference to Lance Armstrong, I must say. Here is Alexander Vinokourov. He's trying to get away from the peloton at the moment. There are the 10 leaders up the road by 7 minutes or more. And then there's a group of riders now getting away in between just to try and catch up with the leaders. I'm not sure they'll get up, though, because they are conscious of the fact that it's 75 kilometers almost from the top of the Obisque to the finishing line. Now, when they came over the Marie Blanc, Armstrong's group was down to about 20 men, but it swelled to the full-size peloton on the way down, so there was no big effort being made off the Col de Marie Blanc. Well, but a long way to climb yet. This is a 16.5 kilometer climb, which is more than 10 miles, and we'll be back on it shortly. And we're back on the sun-drenched slopes here of the last all-category climb, the Col d'Aubisque of this year's Tour de France. As we look here now, there's been a series of counterattacks. Roberto Heras making a move here, trying to lead the peloton. Everybody seems to be having a final dig at Lance Armstrong today, but Heras, of course, at 48 and an hour and a half behind. Can you believe that for a climber
once a teammate who led Lance Armstrong on these mountains to his victories, now languishes really in the doldrums of the Tour de France. And this here is another move on the go as well. Well, we've still got this breakaway up the road of 10 riders. This is Cadel Evans, anxious to keep this going. Well, we've gone up to the leaders here, Paul, and this is an interesting move from Cadel Evans, because Cadel was looking for the early move. He said so before the start. He got into it, and remember, he is 11th overall at the moment, 12 minutes 57 behind Lance Armstrong in his first Tour de France.
Well, this is a great move here by Cadel Evans, and it was funny, a couple of days ago he said, well, I've never really attacked in a big race before. He says, what I normally do is just sit there and everybody just falls away from me, but before the end of the Tour de France, I'm going to go out on the attack and see how it feels, and what a great day to do it.
Well, Cadel Evans is on the way, and this is interesting because this is a good rhythm. Now, there's been a tragedy yesterday as far as Australian and the world of cycling. It's very sad because of an accident in a women's event just before the start of the Tour of Germany, or a tour in Germany. A learner driver drove into the bunch of the Australian cyclists who were training, and as a result of that, Amy Safe, or now Amy Gillette, was killed. And Cadel Evans, who knew her very well, said his best way of expressing his sorrow was to win today, and he said he was going to go on the attack, and that's exactly what he's done. Now, further down the slopes, this is Jan Ullrich here, who is now out on the attack, and he started about a mile ago down this pass.
We've just been joined here by Carlos Sastre, so once again the two big teams, the two big challengers to Lance Armstrong, are going out on the attack. Now, the team manager came up there very quickly indeed, and I wonder what he would have to say there to that move by Jan Ullrich. Looking further down, you can see again it's a fairly large main field we're looking at, and nearly all of the major favourites are in this group. But we do know that Levi Leipheimer, Phil, had a very nasty start to the day.
If you just look at this, I don't think it is Jan Ullrich at the moment. We'll check him out in a minute. He's got dropped, so I don't think it is. Might have been Toby Steinhauser there. Well, they split up anyway. Now, let me say, Serrano, Pereiro and Mazzolini are in the chase group further up the road. Rodriguez joined them, coming from the leaders back to the chase, and I'm not sure where he is at the moment, but from those leaders, Cadel Evans has gone fourth on his own, and here he is, and he's trying desperately now to, it's an awful long time trial to the finish, 78 kilometers. He's just on what will it be, 7 kilometers still to climb here on the Obisque. But this is a man who is going to finish the mountains of the Tour de France, obviously feeling strong. We've always said over the years that when he came to the Tour de France, he would be a player, Cadel Evans, and he's certainly not letting us down.
He certainly isn't letting us down at all, but another man who's been very aggressive on today's stage is Alexander Vinokourov. He too is trying to move himself up in the overall classification. These are the last big mountains of the Tour de France this year, but certainly not the last stages where we can see aggression happen, because the roads up through the middle of France and the Massif Central are ideal for an attacking style of racing.
They are, and they rock and roll all the way into Pau down here, by the way. It's not a flat run, you know, it's basically all off the big mountains. We still have a small climb that hiccups us into the finish in Pau. Even a slightly uphill finish as we climb into the town. So Evans has left the group of 10, 9 chasers now. There are 3 riders together. I think poor old Freddie Rodriguez has gone all the way back, and he'd be almost picked up by the main field. Armstrong led here, which again is thinning out quite quickly here. This happened on the Marie Blanc, got down to about 20 men before they got to the top, and then everybody caught up again. But right now, Paul, it's also noticeable a number of Armstrong's teammates are going backwards in that second group.
Yes, they are once again sliding backwards, and that's, you can see Jan Ullrich right in the middle there. Right on his tail is the yellow jersey of Lance Armstrong. Again, T-Mobile are trying to do what they can to put a lot of pressure and isolate Armstrong on this last mountain stage. And by the way, although the race is rather complicated, Cadel Evans is the leader, chased by a group of 9 riders. Then there's a group of 3 riders a little bit further back, Pereiro, Serrano and Eddie Mazzolini. Freddie Rodriguez has been caught in the middle there, still trying to get across the gap is Alexander Vinokourov. He's chased by Roberto Heras. And then we've got that yellow jersey group, which contains Armstrong, Ullrich and the rest.
And the spread over the lot is just over 7 minutes, so it's not huge yet. Not with a long way to go anyway, but just look at the pain here at the back. Riders will be happy to be over the top of this one today, I think, as they start to string out, and the Armstrong group is getting a little bit of ahead of the bunch. Let's move up the road a bit, because there's Fred Rodriguez now. He's been picked up by Alexander Vinokurov. Fred rising very sensibly here, got into the breakaway, knows he can't climb with the best, so he sat up and he's gone up this mountain at his own speed. And so with a bit of luck, he'll be nearly at the top when the peloton goes over the top, which will put him in the front group for the finish, and he could well win the sprint if it all comes together. Now this is the selection from the actual peloton, all done by fine tempo riding by the two riders on the front, and that's Ulrich and I think Basso. And Popovic moves up there, and so too is Lance Armstrong. 3, 6, 8 men moving clear. Leipheimer is there. Floyd Landis tagged on. Mancebo just fast pedaling. The flag behind them from Ireland there, indicating quite a strong tailwind today, and they've had it most of the day. That was why they did 47 kilometres in the first hour. George Hincapie driving at the front. The man who won at Plat d'Aix had his day off so he could ride for himself. Now he's back in his duty as top domestique. And that's the damage this tempo riding is doing here. All right, well, we're on the Col de Bisque. Let's remind ourselves as to what a brute of a climb this can be. In the profile brought to us by AMD, that's the route as we started today. Got rid of that in an hour over the Col de Cher. The breakaway already on. Over the Col de Marie Blanc, no change. Breakaway still there. There we are now, heading to the top of the Obisque at 5,600 feet today. And an average gradient of 7%, 10.3 miles long. For that reason, it is an all-category or outside category event. So there's still a couple of small climbs to come after this as well. It's a very nice climb, this one, if you're not in the Tour de France, of course. And this is now Armstrong's group here. This will be Sastre as they continue to climb. Ulrich coming back up, having a look, see if Armstrong is interested. Well, I don't think, in all honesty, Paul, I've ever seen Jan Ulrich quite so animated in any Tour de France. He's really into it now these last few days.
He is, and look at this. This is the man who's responding to all of these attacks, and he's dragging the polka dot jersey across with him there of Michael Rasmussen, and the two riders getting caught out a little bit by that acceleration, Levi Leipheimer and Floyd Landis. But this has got to be the Tour de France, Phil, where Armstrong has been attacked the most over the last couple of seasons.
They've never given up. I know that they're racing really also for the second place podium finish between 4 riders, possibly 5 or 6, but we'll wait and see as the split comes here now. Landis is going, and there's Leipheimer, Mancebo, they got caught there.
They got caught by that acceleration, and it was the acceleration of Armstrong chasing down a move by Jan Ulrich. This really has been an incredible stage, and it's always very difficult, Phil, the day after a rest day, because these riders had 2 very difficult Pyrenean stages. Then the body had a cut in between on the rest day, and a lot of bodies don't like that, and I'm sure that's why Levi Leipheimer was actually dropped on the first third category climb of the day.
But let's not forget Vinokurov went with him. Can you believe that? Both dropped on the first climb, and they came back into the peloton. They've recovered well because they've been up at the head ever since. Vinokurov has attacked twice so far, and at the moment is ahead of this group. He's just got rid of Rodriguez, who will be coming back to this group very shortly, I'm sure of that, as Basso is the second wheel here. And there's the range of sprockets today as we look at the leader, Cadel Evans, still tapping out the rhythm in first place on the road, and approximately 25 seconds ahead of 2 riders who are chasing now, Xavier Zandio and also Juan Antonio Fletcher. So the breakaway is splitting up all over the mountain now. Then there's a group of 3, Pereira, Serrano, Mazzolini, but there are others in between as well. We'll pick them out as we get to them on the camera. Here's Fred coming back very quickly here. He's going to see Lance Armstrong go by him. This is the advanced group. I don't think Fred will want to get mixed up in this somehow.
No, I think he'd be quite happy to let them go by. Freddie is a sprinter. He was a man who was responsible for a couple of the victories of Robbie McEwen. He's Robbie McEwen's lead-out man on the flat stages. He got in that early breakaway. He actually did a lot of work in the early breakaway to set something up for his teammate, Cadel Evans, who currently is the lone leader on the race. He went off the front and left that leading group of 9 riders, and he's currently leading the race by around about 5.5 minutes over this group of very select riders, which contains the yellow jersey, Jan Ulrich, Ivan Basso, and actually all of the riders in the top 7 places in the overall classification.
A group of 9 riders here now. Armstrong just observing them all. Look at that beautiful sight, the mountains all around them.
And here comes Cadel Evans, midway to 3/4 up the Col d'Aubisque in his first Tour de France. Brilliant riding by Cadel Evans, this 11th overall this morning. He's been as high as 4th in the race today with the lead he had over the field. They'll pick him back if they can, but if they don't, then he's looking at a top 6 situation in the Tour. Magnificent in his first Tour.
He's waited for the day, he's waited for the occasion to present itself, and he got into that early morning breakaway, as we call it, of 11 riders after just 19 kilometres. And again, a very fast first hour of racing, 47.5 kilometres of racing covered in just the first 60 minutes of the day. We're getting further up towards the summit here of the Col d'Aubisque. Actually, they go over the summit, it drops down a fraction, then they have to go over the small Col de Soulot, and then it's a very long descent down into the valley and a long ride then down into the finishing town of Pau. But Roberto Heras here is actually riding himself across the gap to join up with Alexander Vinokourov, who too is looking at, in fact, trying to get himself a higher place in the overall classification than his current 8th.
Well, a good pair of legs coming up to help out Alexander Vinokourov there. Roberto Heras moving up alongside him. Cadel Evans up there, I think, putting in the finest performance we've seen from an Australian since the halcyon days of their greatest ever cyclist in the Tours, Phil Anderson. Anderson rode the Tour 13 times, finished every one. He won the white jersey, he also wore the yellow jersey.
Well, Roberto Heras trying to get some glory here for Liberty Seguras. This man is a magnificent climber, but unfortunately he really hasn't been prominent at all in the Tour de France, and this is a way of possibly saving some glory for Liberty Seguros, whose best man in the overall standings is Jörg Jatz, the German, who started the day in 15th place. But this man, Phil, I have to say, is really burning up the field. Cadel Evans riding for Australia.
And riding well. So we're looking here at Cadel Evans, and free as a bird to fly. Lance Armstrong won't chase him, but the concern, of course, is by the riders in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th position overall. They've got to chase. There's the situation with the big screen at the finish, and of course there's lots of Americans down here. George and Lance doing well again today. See you in a moment. Welcome back as we look at Roberto Heras and Alexander Vinokourov. Heras has caught up to Vinokourov on the Battle of the Aubisque. Rather a complicated climb this, but let me quickly fill you in. At the moment, Cadel Evans is leading inside 5 kilometres to the top of the climb. Then the rest of a 10-man breakaway are behind him. And then Oscar Pereiro, Marcus Serrano, Eddie Mazzolini are behind the breakaway. They left the peloton a while back now. And those two we've just seen are behind that trio, while Armstrong is in a group of 10. And frankly, this is where the Tour de France is right now, because all the principal podiums are here in the group with Lance Armstrong. Good steady pacemaking. I don't know how long he's going to keep this up, Sastre, for Ivan Basso, because he's looked in pain for a while now, but he's doing a good job. He's reduced the peloton to just a select band of merry men, and here they are. Levi Leipheimer is in there as well. This is further up just ahead, and this is Roberto Heras trying to put some matters to rights. He's nearly an hour and a half behind Armstrong. Unbelievable for a climber of this man's quality.
Well, what's fairly impressive, though, Phil, is Cadel Evans actually has a minute-and-a-half advantage over the remnants of that breakaway he was with earlier on. And so he really is opening himself up rather a serious gap. But this man is nicknamed the Devil. He's been coming to all of the major stage races for the last few years. And I think he's looking to bring some other interest to the front end of the main field.
Well, he's the only man they never punch when he starts running behind like that, because they don't want to offend him. This is the Armstrong group. Lance has just sat there. You see, he always sits out the group and watches what's going on, ready to move if somebody starts to sprint away. He also keeps himself in a much safer position if somebody should touch a wheel and go down. George Hincapie on the back there. This looks like Kashakin is in trouble now. He's got smashed in the face today by a spectator. It looked like an accident, but he did make his nose bleed on the climb of the Marie Blanc. But I was saying about George, he was dropped a few moments ago and he's got back. He's done well to do that. Landis is here, so too is Leipheimer.
Well, it's rather important, I would say, for Andre Kashakin, Phil, to try and stay in contact, because he's the second-place rider in the young rider classification. Well, the last time we actually went over the Col d'Aubisque was back in 2002, and the man who went over the top on that occasion was the great French rider Laurent Jalabert, who was having a fabulous season.
And he's working now on French television, and according to the French television people we've been chatting with, he's doing a really good job too. Well, he should. He's had the performances and he's certainly got the knowledge.
Up to the leader now, Cadel Evans, riding in the style of the legendary Phil Anderson of Australia here, because this is a man who can one day win the Tour de France. And I think today he's showing us that. You know, it was only a couple of days ago, Paul, he said, I might be good, but these guys who are beating me, I'm not in their class. But you know, as you know, you can improve, and I think in the years ahead, this man can win the Tour.
Well, you have good days and bad days as a professional cyclist, and Cadel Evans had a couple of bad days. He was really put under pressure because of the way these guys were attacking on the big mountain stages. But today, he is doing what he claims he has never done before in his career as a professional road racer, actually gone out on the attack. And this could be a new sensation for Cadel Evans, who, let's not forget, Phil, comes to the sport of road racing after being an exceptionally successful mountain biker.
He was the world's best mountain biker, there's no doubt about that. As we drop down a few numbers of people here, because we've lost count of the men in between, but we suspect there will be 14 riders ahead of these two at the moment. Alexander Vinokourov and Roberto Heras, and the American flags are almost as common here this year as the French flag, because of course the Americans wanted to see Lance Armstrong for the last time. Win or lose, he will retire on Sunday coming. This is Armstrong's group. Jan Ullrich has had a dig today. He went away at one stage. They brought him back. And now it just seems to be a case of fast tempo riding. Kashakin has just gone onto the back there, but he's hanging on, number 108. So too is Hincapie, the hero of the toughest day through the Pyrenees. He also has been in trouble. This rider is now definitely in trouble. Andreas Kloden.
Hats off to George Hincapie after that long breakaway just a couple of days ago before the rest day. He now knows he has to stay with Lance Armstrong for as long as possible. And you might wonder why he has to stay with Lance Armstrong. Well, Armstrong, again, is pretty much isolated. And if he was to have a mechanical incident or a flat tire on the descent here of the mountain, the team cars actually, Phil, are currently quite a long way behind. Hincapie's order would be to pass his wheel across to Lance Armstrong, and they would actually swap wheels if there was a problem for Armstrong mechanically.
Well, we're about a kilometre now from the summit. That's just over half a mile for Cadel Evans. He's made it look rather easy, I must say. But Cadel has ridden superbly. There is the kilometre marker. As he comes through this crowd, this has got to be one of the highlights of his career for Cadel Evans here, riding up to the crowd on the top of the all-category climb of the Col d'Aubisque. He's got 4:43 on the three pursuers, and he's got 5 minutes plus on Armstrong's group. So Armstrong's group, Paul, have pulled back 2.5 minutes on him.
They've pulled back 2.5 minutes, but it's not really Armstrong who is chasing. It's the pressure that's coming onto the front of the Armstrong group by Team CSC and by T-Mobile, who once again can see this as the last opportunity to shake the top of the overall classification. But it was a great move by Cadel Evans to decide to go away alone. But at the top, Phil, he is facing up to 72 kilometres riding towards the finish line in Po. That's a long way on your own.
It is an awful long way. A time trial, which is the best part of 2 hours. It won't be to take about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. But that's a long way to hold off the Tour de France, I agree. Roads might be in his favour, though, because it's not flat. He's not in the wide open expanse of a promenade on the seacoast. It'll be undulating and quite hard.
Ulrich's going again.
Ulrich's giving the pressure again, further down. He's about 3 kilometres from the summit right now.
He is battling here, Phil, for a podium position in Paris. This is a man whose worst position in the Tour de France is 4th overall, and he was criticised for it. Now, that really is a shame.
Oh. This guy is always criticised for something or other. They're coming up on Vinokourov and Roberto Heras now, but there's only 4 of them coming up. Motorbikes need to move now as Lance Armstrong shepherds through Ullrich, Basso and Rasmussen, and just getting back as well, Leipheimer, Mancebo and Floyd Landis.
Well, Heras has tried again on the slopes of the Pyrenees to do something for his Spanish public, but he's not been able to because of the battle going on for a high podium finish. There you can see Jan Ullrich will not give up arms until the final day of the Tour de France here this year. Mancebo's in a spot of bother here at the back. Hincapie's disappeared.
Did you see Vinokourov drop back and hook up there with Ullrich? The first sign of friendship between the two, actually, because Vinokourov was happy to take up the pacemaking. There he is with Jan.
Well, he's a great character, Alexander Vinokourov. I wonder which team he will ride for next year. There's an awful lot of discussion because there's people assuming that he might move across to Team Discovery Channel, but we will not know. This is Francisco Mancebo, 5th overall. He is in difficulty now.
But he's not far from the top, and he better hope that it's not long to go because he's losing ground there. Just look at the scenery off the shoulder of Cadel Evans. He is almost at the summit.
A big feather in his cap here as winner of this all-category climb. He won't be denied that now. Armstrong has decided to say, hey guys, if you want to do this, I'll come and join in. Look at this.
This is going to be, Phil, the last big mountain of Lance Armstrong's career, and he wants to show these guys that he's still got a little bit of petrol left in the tank as we go to the summit of the climb, and Cadel Evans is going to go over the top with around about a 4-minute advantage over the Lance Armstrong yellow jersey group.
And I tell you what, look at his face. This guy is strong today. He is really driving. He's not hanging. He is pushing on here. Cadel Evans isn't thinking of waiting at the top of the Col d'Aubisque. He's going for the win.
He is going for the win. It's going to be a very long solo for him to do it, because from the summit of this line, Phil, I don't think I've ever seen Cadel Evans' face look like that. It is screwed up in pain and determination.
Well, he is the man who has told us he has never attacked in a professional bicycle race in his life. He has only followed and then found everybody else has fell away from him. And he said, I'm going to attack and find out what it feels like. Well, he knows now.
This is Pereiro. Yep, this is a complicated race here this afternoon because there are riders scattered all over the slopes of this mountain. Pereiro is motivated by the fact he was beaten a couple of days ago to the summit of the big climb Pla d'Adet, and what he wants to do today is to try and get himself the stage victory. And he's actually going over the summit there in second place, so he's passed the group of the early morning breakaway, which was initially 11 riders.
When we use the word complicated, we usually mean we haven't a clue what's going on, because frankly, Pereiro, we were never told he'd gone past the group, but he's gone over the top in second place. This will be for third place now. This is Mazzolini. So whatever happened to the breakaway, they've caught and been dropped by this group as Mazzolini goes over there as well. And the Il Baliris rider who's gone over with him.
Well, that's Zandio. He was in the break early on.
That's right. Well, he was in the original group, so he hung on.
Yep, he survives. And next rider coming over as well is the rider from Liberty Seguros, Marcos Serrano. He was also halfway across the group to the group with Oscar Pereira a few moments ago. And the next group, these you can see now, are starting to be the survivors, Phil, of that early morning breakaway. He'd said he wanted to win himself one of the average mountain stages. He was very aggressive early on in the year in Paris-Nice. And again, Alexander Vinokourov is whacking them.
I make this his third serious move today since the race started to get rid of the group. They brought him back twice. He's trying again.
But look at Armstrong. Whenever Vinokourov attacks, he never chases him down. He doesn't have to, because Vinokourov is almost 10 minutes behind Armstrong in the overall classification. Again here, Phil, remnants of the early morning breakaway. That is Gilbert, the man from Française des Jeux, on the front, better suited as a sprinter on the flat stages. And the man with him, Juan Antonio Fletcher.
So this breakaway of what was originally 11, reduced to 10 immediately on the climb, has been blown all over the mountain now. We don't quite know who is left in front, but they're all going over in dribs and drabs. And what could well happen, of course, on the long descent, they will all regroup, and we could see that breakaway reform again in pursuit of Cadel Evans. Here we are, back further down. Armstrong has got control of this race now.
Vinokourov back in the fold there, but it's a hard day for the man who started in fifth, Francesco Mancebo. He needs to recover. Again here, remnants of that early morning group going over the top. Those were the two Bouygues Telecom riders, Geslin and Jérôme Pinault. As we go a little bit further down, a lot of people, a lot of American flags out here, Phil, the Star-Spangled Banner, to celebrate the last Pyrenean mountain of Lance Armstrong's career.
Not the last big climb. We still have to climb to the airfield in Monde, which is a couple of days away. A nasty finish to a stage race, believe me. But this is goodbye to the famous mountain change of France now for one Lance Armstrong. 6.5 times a Tour de France winner, waiting for Sunday.
Well, I would think it's probably 6.75 because we've only got 600 miles to go to the finish. And again, the King of the Mountains leader
needs the points. It's all category, remember, high points.
He needs the points, but I think also he needs the pride of showing that he is the best climber in this race, and that's why he wants to lead this very select group over the top of the climb. And this looks like a little bit of a comeback from Cloden, who's recovering further down the slopes.
Well, he'll easily get back up amongst it on the descent by the look of it. Andreas Cloden. As he now, there's Chris Horner going through. He was a part of the break and about to be picked up by Armstrong. Good place to get caught, because now they're together on the descent.
Well, it's a good place to get caught because now we've got a bit of a false flat on the first part of the descent down off the Col d'Aubisque. and then just a little bit of a kick of a kilometre or so up to the summit of the Col de Soulor, and then a long 20-kilometre descent down into the valley.
In the old days, the Col de Soulor was good enough for points in the King of the Mountains. It's nothing this time.
Well, it depends which way you go over the Col de Soulor, but this way it's only really a climb of around about a couple of kilometres or so. But you can see the clouds here starting to drift down over the summit of this high Pyrenean mountain this afternoon.
But don't worry, there'll be no rain today, I say confidently. It's beautiful in Pau, and they'll leave the clouds on top of the mountain shortly as they race towards the Pau, one of the most visited cities of the Tour de France. There's Geshakin and Sastre. Cloden's got on the back end.
And Hincapie at the front. Hincapie will make a daredevil descent here, Phil, because he wants to be alongside a single rider. He wants to be with Lance Armstrong because he knows if Armstrong has a mechanical problem, he needs some help alongside him.
Unbelievable, George. And what happens if they regroup at the front without the rest of the sprinters? George could win again.
That would be quite remarkable as Hincapie leads him over the top. He knows this climb to perfection.
Well, this has been one big battle on the last big climb of the Pyrenees here. They're over the top. There's the sign for you, the Col d'Aubisque. This is Jaroslav Popovic heading up. He'll be back with the leaders on the descent as well. As he drives through as the best rookie of the Tour, he's staying very much in that position. All of the action, and now the pursuit will begin. We'll take a short break. Come back and join us. We're chasing Cadel Evans. See you in a moment. Welcome back. We've just started the descent now of the Col d'Aubisque. Armstrong is waiting for his teammates to rejoin. He's freewheeling here, talking with Levi Leipheimer. No big effort whatsoever. He's in control, remember. The last big Orcadry climb is behind them. Not far behind them is Tchetchu Riviera and also Jaroslav Popovic and George Hincapie. And I think pretty soon now, Hincapie should be the first to reach this group. There's the group. Chris Horner caught just before the summit. What a good time to get caught because he's now with the Armstrong group on the way down. This is the leader of the day. He's got just on 40 miles to rock and roll to the line. It's not all downhill and it's not all uphill. It's good racing roads and he'll be out of sight of the peloton for a long way. Cadel Evans here has made his move very early on. He had to do it then. He's a born climber. Now he's got to hang on. This is the slope of the Col de Soulor now. From this direction, it's not a there's no points for the King of the Mountains. It's a very steep climb. From the side he's about to go down, but very short from this side of the Col d'Aubisque. The Étape du Tour, which was for the amateur cyclists, some 8,000 of them, I think it was, took part the other week on this very route. And this was the course that they chose to ride from Moronx down to Pau. Let's update ourselves with the Bank of America American standings. And boy, are they having a good tour, the Americans. Apart from Lance Armstrong, Levi Leipheimer is 6th. Floyd Landis is 7th. 2 top positions in prospect for them in Paris. Bobby Julie back to his old in 16th place, once finished 3rd. Hincapie's had a stage win. Chris Horner's been close, and Freddie Rodriguez is leading out McEwen. That's where they all stand in our Bank of America high standings. As we are now back with the leader, and his shoulders bobbing here. Cadel Evans is driving towards the top of the Col de Soulor. Boy, he's working hard, Paul. He's trying. He knows now he's got a chance, a real chance to win a stage.
He certainly has, and he will be hyper motivated. This is the slight incline. It only goes up for about a couple of kilometers to the summit of the Col de Soulor, and then he will start the downhill section of this part of the course, and he'll go down for approximately 20 kilometers down into the valley in the small town of Ferrières, and then he faces uphill to the long undulations down into the outskirts of Pau.
Well, he's doing his best. And there is the slopes of the chasers. They've started to kick up now. This is the Armstrong group at the moment. As they just in no interest at all just now. They're getting themselves reorganized down there. And just when of those riders sneaking on the back, it might be George Hincapie getting on.
Well, Hincapie's already come to the front because I just saw him giving a bottle on to Lance Armstrong. But also coming on, I caught a sight of Jaroslav Popovic, who wasn't too far back, and I think that is Popovic over there on the left-hand side in the white jersey. So Armstrong surrounded by his henchmen once again. This is in a group a little bit further back. I think what's also
nearly 12 minutes.
I think what's also quite interesting, in a group at around about 2 minutes to the yellow jersey, I caught sight of Stuart O'Grady.
So he knows if he can reach, he'll have chance of scoring big points in the green jersey competition that might finally see him win that. competition. That's his ambition. He's finished second and third in Paris, but he's never won it, while the Australians Baden Cook and Robbie McEwen have. The Norwegian flags fly. Over 11 3/4 minutes has gone by as this group is topped. Champion of Spain is the third man in the group, Juan Manuel Garate. Now you see them grabbing those newspapers, not for a read on the way down. It's up the jerseys and to stop the wind chilling their chest.
Well, Cadell Evans here, Phil, has got 4 minutes and 40 seconds advantage over the yellow jersey group of Lance Armstrong, and this is a man who over his career, I think he's broken his collarbone on 7 separate occasions. And one occasion was actually before the start of the Tour de France a couple of years ago, when he was actually looking at this particular climb. He crashed on the descent and fractured his collarbone again. I don't think he'll do it now, because I think there's more metal in his collarbones than actual bone.
He's got to be careful he doesn't turn rusty when it rains, though. 12 minutes 25 seconds has passed now, and there is Thor Hushovd coming over the top. Don't think he'll catch the lead as being 12 minutes behind at this point.
Well, you notice he's got 2 teammates with him from Crédit Agricole, and what they will do is try and pace him back to another group, hopefully to try and catch Stuart O'Grady.
Well, we're briefly back with the leader here, but as you saw there, Thor Hushovd going over the top. He is the leader of that green jersey competition, but if O'Grady catches up with the leaders today, he'll score well on the finishing line, that's for sure. Let's update ourselves now on all of the coloured jerseys of the Tour de France. This is our standings here. Lance Armstrong is the yellow, of course. Thor Hushovd is from Norway. He is the leader in green. Jaroslav Popovic is the best rookie of the Tour in white. And Michael Rasmussen looking very good here in the polka dot. And that is brought to us by ThinkPad. So there we are, down there with the group now getting bigger by the minute. Armstrong has got George alongside him. Very shortly, Popovic should be there as well. We're having to use our helicopter for that group now because our cameras are so spread out on the way down. Just 62 kilometres, about 38.5 miles still to race to the finish. Cadell Evans must take it fairly confidently down here if he's going to hold off the chase. There's not a real chase at the moment. Riviera's got himself back, which means that Popovic is probably back as well. And that's Popovic just behind Riviera, so Lance has got his troops around him now. And they might start to ride because he's got more than anybody else. Thomas Vogler, I think it's Thomas Vogler, he's looking a bit, yes it is Thomas Vogler, he's looking so pained. Hardly recognise him on the top of the obese. Another 14 minutes lost at the moment to the leaders. He's more than 3 hours behind Lance Armstrong this year. Last year he was the leader of the race for 10 days. There'll always be big cheers for Thomas. He'll look for a newspaper now as he comes over the top to put up his jersey to trap the wind on the way down. We are on the way down with Cadell Evans here. He started the day 12:57 behind Lance Armstrong. He's not dreaming of beating Lance Armstrong, but he is looking to move into the top 6 overall in this competition. Long way still to go to Paris. All right, well, as we go to a break, we'll get pens and paper ready. Here's our Subway trivia question for you. Since their debut in 1981, how many Americans have competed in the Tour de France? It's a good question. Is it A, 31, B, 41, C, 51, or D, 61? Wow. Well, I didn't even know we had even 31. Answer when we come back. Our Subway Tour trivia question. Since their debut in 1981, how many Americans have competed in the Tour de France? The answer is A, 31. Well, I didn't even realize it was quite as many as that, but that just shows you how American cycling is very definitely on the ascendancy, even without Lance Armstrong. This is the scene now on the top of the Col du Soulor with the leaders. They've come down the back of the Obisque and a short climb to Soulor. Then they'll start. And as you can see, the Armstrong group is now become quite a big peloton again. And Acevedo, George Hincapie, Rubiera have all got back up alongside Lance and Popovic. Cadell Evans, Oscar Pereiro are together, and the Cadell doesn't look as though he's enjoying the descent quite as much as Oscar. He's just come up, by the way, Pereiro, and got up behind Cadell. Now, Cadell would do well to go with this guy because this guy is on fire in this Tour, and every breakaway he's tried so far he hasn't got the result he's deserved.
Well, in the back of his mind, Cadell is probably thinking back to when he actually crashed on this descent, when he was actually making a reconnaissance of the Col de l'Aubisque and the Col de Soulor for the Tour de France back in 2002. He should be a great descender because, after all, the man we're looking at the front of the race, Cadell Evans, Phil, was the mountain biker of the year and the winner of the Mountain Bike World Cup.
Well, let's hope that he doesn't crash this time as Eddie Mazzolini, a bit further back down the road, continues his descent with Zandio. Well, we're looking now. In fact, Mazzolini here has caught up with Pereiro and Cadell Evans, so there's now 3. And again, Mazzolini is riding a superb Tour de France this year. And these are 3 riders who could well improve their overall positions. Well, don't forget, Active.com is your one-step shop to find training articles, message boards and thousands of endurance sports events such as cycling, triathlon and running. Visit Active.com today. You can register online immediately for events. You can also sign up for the Daily Tour, which is a free Tour de France newsletter and will include updates, commentary and a chance for you to win great cycling prizes. It's an exclusive partnership between Active.com and us here at OLNTV.com. Well, there's the bunch. Not interested yet in that breakaway. Well, I think this is probably the best thing that could have happened to Cadell, to get somebody with the power of Mazzolini. They've got to hold on to Oscar Pereiro, but they should get him back on the flat.
Well, Oscar Pereira is just around the corner, but again, you know, Cadell probably backing off a fraction. You know, these are very dangerous descents, very technical, tricky descents here on the slopes of the Pyrenees. And as you can see, again, a little bit of blackness in the road every now and again. When you see that small amount of blackness, that is normally the tar which is starting to melt. And if you try to put your brakes on in a situation like this, very often, and we've seen this happen a number of times in the past, a rider can actually lose his back wheel and go down very hard, and nobody in a breakaway wants to have that happen.
Well, again, nothing more serious than just a general descent here by the peloton. They are still way down at the moment, 5.5 minutes or so. They pulled back, though, from 7.5 at the bottom of the Aubisque, but they've lost a bit of time again because they haven't really chased that breakaway, which is a bit unusual because when you think you've got Mazzolini and Evans up there now, 2 riders who've got good high overall positions in the Tour.
Just to let you into a nice little feeling, as a non-climber, Phil, when you get to this point of the Tour de France, I know guys like Robin McEwen, Thor Hushovd and the other guys who've suffered over the mountain passes are now breathing a sigh of relief because they know they've almost got Paris on the horizon.
I'm not sure Robbie's over the Aubisque yet. Well, this is the way down, and Mazzolini, you know, is still fairly high up in 14th place overall, just 18 minutes off the lead of Armstrong. And as we watch the boys go downhill here, using another skill as a professional cyclist, let's have a look at our Saar power descent of the day. Our Saar power descent is, of course, Cadell Evans of Australia. He comes from Victoria State in Australia. The ex-mountain biker trying now to race to the finish using all of the skills he possesses to outwit Armstrong and steal the stage. He's not trying to steal his yellow jersey. He wants the stage victory today. As he continues his descent, Armstrong in no hurry at all. That's our Saab power descent. So at the moment then, we've got 3 riders out front now. Evans has been caught by Oscar Pereira. Pereira, momentarily at least, has gone ahead, making a better descent. Mazzolini's joined Cadell Evans. Pereira is just down there, the other side of that car. He's pulling away at the moment, but if he's planning a long breakaway on his own, he might have another think coming, because these 2 should recover once they get off this descent. Quite what will happen to the peloton, well, we'll have to wait to find out. This is a very good descent to the Aubisque, but the peloton, well, we'll call it the peloton, it's an advanced group, really, is descending with a lot of caution, and I don't blame them. This is one descent nobody wants to fall off on. It's the exit of the Pyrenees now, and all of the sprinters something like 7 minutes behind Armstrong's group and 14 minutes behind the leader on the road just now. We continue descend towards the valley, then we'll be racing into Po for the sprint. See you in a moment. Welcome back. Our cameras just slipped down the road here to pick up Oscar Pereiro. Can you believe he had a flat tyre? And he's caught up by Zandio. And together, they're going back to the 2 leaders. 4 men can race better than 1. And this breakaway might have a chance now at 30 miles still to go to the finish. So this is a good move. And the Elis Balearis rider there, Xavier Zandio, is getting his team back in the frame. They've been rather absent since Alessandro Valverde won when he beat Lance Armstrong at Courchevel and retired as soon after that with tendinitis. So 4 riders now in the lead and 49 kilometers left to go to the finish. This is the peloton. Chris Horner sitting last at the moment, but it's a good bunch to be in now because these should come down to the finish together. Whether they can bridge 5.5 minutes, those 4 men up front, well, that's debatable because that's a good lead now by 4 riders, all with a little bit to gain. At the moment, Cadel Evans has done enough to move up into 5th place overall. All right, well, here's another guy trying to survive here, and in 5 days it's the reality series that changed television and the competitors who made it happen: Richard, Kelly, Rudy and Susan. Survivor lives on OLN, the first alliances, first tribal councils, first immunity and the first unforgettable season, Borneo. Survivor lives on OLN. The first episode premieres commercial free after the final stage of the Tour de France, and then again on Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Little narrow streets. We're off the basic descent of the Col de Soulor, but they're still a little bit ripply at the moment. Oscar Pereiro is now back. It's a nice working group, that, Paul. I think sometimes punctures happen for the best because it's put 4 strong men together. They brought up the other rider too, Zandio.
Well, I think it would have been more sensible for Oscar Pereira to stay in contact with those riders, Phil, because if they're a 4-man group, I think they've got a much better chance of surviving because we're still looking at around about, well, just inside of 50 kilometers to go, and that's around about an hour and 15 minutes of racing. This group, on the other hand, is seriously starting to swell up. There's no real reason for any of the top contenders in the overall classification to try and chase it down, although maybe Francisco Mancebo's team might like to, because he is going to be threatened a fraction by Cadel Evans in the break.
Well, Cadel is 11th overall today at 12 minutes and 57 seconds. Currently, they're saying the lead is around about, let's say, 6 minutes. It's just a little bit less than 6 minutes. That would give him 6 minutes off his overall, and that's going to put him right up in 5th place overall, thereabouts. That's a huge jump today. Now, the best ever position by an Australian cyclist at Paris in the Tour de France was Phil Anderson. Rode 13 tours, finished every one of them, and he actually finished 5th on 2 occasions overall, and that's the position that Cadel is aiming at.
Yeah, Phil rode the Tour on 13 occasions. He was a very tough competitor, and he was also a very important part in the early career of Lance Armstrong, because Armstrong took advice from 2 old professionals, and I say old, they were a bit younger than me, but obviously Sean Yates, the British rider who wore the yellow jersey in the Tour de France, and Phil Anderson, who knew almost every point that you had to be at the front when it came down to the one-day races that Anderson himself was also very successful in.
That's right. Well, in his first season with Motorola, in fact, Phil Anderson won 15 races, and that kept the company in sponsorship for a number of years to follow after that. There we are on our way down now as we continue to regroup. You can see by the way these boys are going down, this is the most casual descent I think they've made since the Tour began. So there's no huge effort here today underneath the sunshine of the Pyrenees. Those 4 riders have a real chance of success, I think. We'll take a break, come back as we continue to chase them down to Pau. There they are, the Pyrenees. We're saying farewell, au revoir, see you next year. Lance Armstrong will never be riding through those mountains again wearing a yellow jersey in a Tour de France. And today he's having the day of his life. He's just sitting there watching the riders scrabble for the crumbs, and he's riding along in a bunch which is getting bigger by the minute. The breakaway is 4 riders strong: Cadel Evans, Oscar Pereiro, Eddie Mazzolini, and now we've got Xavier Zandio in his first Tour de France. There he is, number 39, also in the front group. The rest of the original breakaway haven't given up. They've reformed behind. They are integrated. Marcus Serrano is chasing alone. Jörg Ludwig is chasing alone. And they could yet all come together up here at the front. Whether Armstrong's group are interested enough to catch up, I'm not so sure, because they're slipping away. They are now dropping back to over 6 minutes, nearly 6.5. This is the leading group here, all working together. Remember, Cadel Evans was the man who launched the attack on the Col d'Aubisque. The others caught him up on the way down. Pereiro almost dropped them and then punctured. Had a flat tyre. He's got back into the group, though. This is the Armstrong group.
And this is Chris Horner with a front wheel puncture, I think. He's pointing at his tyre. So he's feeling a problem. I think he's losing ground, losing air in the tyre. He wants a change here. Now, he shouldn't have to panic here because this group is quite big and not racing flat out. Just got to get a good change, which will take about 8 to 9 seconds for a front wheel, and get back into the action. So he signaled to the race referee, who will have now called up the team car of Sonia Duval for Chris. He won't get off that bike, and he knows that team car is right behind him. And mind you, he's got to take it easy with the front wheel softening on these sort of roads. Continuing then, Lance has got his men up front now. 4 teammates have caught back up now. So it's Lance plus 4, all in control of the peloton. No drive going on. Chris Horner looks as though he's got a flat tyre.
Well, it's a good time to have it because the pressure is not on that much in this group, and if he does get a quick change, he'll be very shortly back into the main field. I think Armstrong just taking these descents nice and gently. He doesn't want to take too many risks. After all, every kilometre that ticks by, he's getting himself just that little bit closer to Paris. But what he's doing here also is putting pressure on the other teams of Il Baleares, Team Gerolsteiner and Team Phonak, because in fact at the moment Cadel Evans is actually threatening the position of Mancebo, Leipheimer and Landis in the overall race.
42 kilometres, 26 miles, whichever way you look at it, it's the same distance on the way down, and Zandio, Evans, Pereiro, Mazzolini are still the 4 riders. And there's the Phonak team car now to give them a complete reprisal of what is happening behind. And I think they'll say, look, Lance Armstrong's bunch are not chasing you. You've got a real chance to succeed here. Now, this is Jörg Ludwig, and he's also got with him now Domino Vacandrade, who must have
Marco Serrano.
Yeah, the guy that was... Is this Serrano coming through?
This is Serrano on the front. That is Ludwig in second place for Domino Vacanze. These guys are being caught halfway across the gap, and they're currently around about 1 minute and 52 down, so they've still got a long chase to try and reintegrate that leading group of 4 riders. And then there's a group a little bit further back of about 8 riders who are basically the survivors of that early morning breakaway. 11 riders initially escaped the race after just 19 kilometers and built up a big lead, and it was Cadel Evans who was the major aggressor on the slopes of the climb. The biggest ride really was done by Oscar Pereira, because he rode across on the Col de l'Aubisque, caught the breakaway, went straight by and caught Cadel Evans.
Serrano here, he was also coming across. He was never in the early morning breakaway, and he never got across. He was with Pereiro, and he's still chasing him. Pereiro's now driving at the front. Ludwig is trying to get across. He's had a good day in the breakaway because he was first over the top of the Marie Blanc, which means he's on good form. He was second over the Col de Cher. He lost his ground on the climb of the Aubisque, but he still might get back. And if he does get back, it wouldn't be unheard of for him to win the stage. So they've still got to chase back at the moment. They're timed at around about 1 minute and 52 seconds behind the leaders.
You can see Team Discovery just basically controlling affairs. This is Salvatore Commesso who's reintegrated the group. This group now, Phil, is starting to get very large, and it's looking... It was almost going the way we expected, a 50 to 70 man group on this descent of the Col de l'Aubisque, but we didn't expect to see a breakaway with Cadel Evans in it.
And these boys are not racing, Paul. They're just getting themselves to the finish. There's a good chance that breakaway will work now.
I'm pretty sure it's got an excellent chance of surviving. They're still holding on to a very big lead over the main field. In fact, the advantage has gone up to around about 6.5 minutes.
People like Levi Leipheimer, Floyd Landis, Michael Rasmussen, and indeed Vinokourov are going to get worried now, because Cadel Evans is probably going to take time out of them big time today. Well, this is the breakaway. There's the Cadel Evans has the most to gain in this leading group. The rider in 14th place, his next best, is Mazzolini. He's 17 minutes behind Armstrong, almost 18. Armstrong's got no reason to chase these people. If they grab a few minutes today, he doesn't care, because he can still keep his yellow jersey and take time out of them all in the last weekend on the big time trial. So there's where we're headed to now. 40 kilometers to go to the finish as they make it up towards here. And the Cadel Evans, I'm not surprised, is driving this breakaway as much as he can. He has a big chance here of a high position. Couple of seconds time bonus here. Pereira says you're not going to have it. Oscar Pereiro here in the sprint takes out the 6 seconds. That will mean nothing to him. And Cadel Evans gets 4 seconds for second place. And it looks as though the Il Baleares rider Zandio gets the third.
Interesting to see that Evans even bothered to sprint for that with Pereira. There is €800, just over $1,000 for the prize there. So Pereira gets that. All right, well, as they continue to race on, let's have a look at the Honda highlight of the day. And of course, it was all on stage 15 48 hours ago. Guess who it is? George Hincapie, the man of stage 15. And we never thought we'd ever say that of George, who's won some great bike races, but never in the mountains, and never before has he won a stage of the Tour de France. He had to follow because that was the way the tactics were, but when he saw the finishing line, Oscar Pereira was passed. George Hincapie could not believe it as he held his head. He had won the toughest stage of this year's Tour de France. And not surprisingly, Lance was the first to give him a hug. And that was our Honda highlight of the day. And here we are now, and they're getting up, are they? Because I think we're in the sprint town. Yes, we are. There's the banners. These are the two chasing the four leaders, led at the moment by Jörg Ludwig, and Marcus Serrano is with him. They're working together to try and just catch up a gap which is now 1 minute 52 seconds between the four front runners and the two chasers. They're going to have to keep hard at it because those four are waiting for nobody right now. Their ambition is to keep that group as small as possible. 24 miles to go to the finish. Not a long way, probably about 50 minutes at the most, maybe less. There's Ludwig and Serrano as they continue. There's the sprint, won by Oscar Pereira. Cadel Evans very much in the hunt. And we'll see you in a moment. Come back. Looking down on the peloton that gets bigger and bigger as the minutes tick by. All the riders coming off the mountains. The peloton not making any big pressure attack at all, and the leaders are still there. Four of them out in front, but now there is a change of chasing at the front. T-Mobile have just realized, along with Gerolsteiner, that Cadel Evans could be rushing now into fourth place in this race overall. So these two teams, the team of Levi Leipheimer, Gerolsteiner, the team of Ulrich, have realized they've got to come and do the work. Now they're playing into the hands of Armstrong, who can take time out along with his team, but the concern is there now. Cadel Evans trying to race at a very late stage of the Tour to a podium position in Paris. And there's they're still a kilometre from the finish here, you know, which means they are from the finish of the sprint. They're a long way behind the leaders right now. Well, here we go. Hey kids, it's time for the Tour. Log on to mikeandthebike.com for all the action from the Tour de France with games, tour facts, daily updates. Sponsored by OLN and Mike the Bike. It's available at amazon.com and all of your favorite bookstores. Hey, I'm Mike the Bike. Well, this is an interesting swing of their tactics now. They're coming through the hotspot sprint here, which will leave them 40 kilometres to go. The leaders are at 33. At the moment, Paul, I make the leaders 7 kilometres ahead of the peloton.
That's an awful long margin, and it's actually a number of different teams starting to whip up the pace on the front end of the peloton, and that's because Cadel Evans has made the move of the Tour here. He's looking at moving himself up into the top 5 places overall, but he's now threatening the position of a large number of teams. This is the sprint point, and once they cross this sprint point, it's 40 kilometres to go to the finish. This is the man who won the stage into Gérardmer. Peter Weening on the front, whipping up the pace for Team Rabobank. And they must really be worried even about the position of Michael Rasmussen in a race like this, because that 6.5 minutes lead for that leading quartet really is quite remarkable.
Well, Rabobank also getting interested in the chase back at the moment. They've no real reason that I can think of, because they haven't got a man up there at the moment in the overall. Well, what am I talking about? Because they've got Michael Rasmussen. I keep forgetting, because he's worn his polka dot jersey ever since the mountain started. He is the Rabobank, and they've got to ride now, because first of all, we started with Cadel Evans endangering the whereabouts of Floyd Landis and Levi Leipheimer, the two Americans. Then he went on to Francesco Mancebo. Then he crept into the realms of Jan Ullrich, who is fourth. Now he's creeping into the realms of Michael Rasmussen. Very shortly, the whole field will be chasing.
Well, no, I don't think anybody expected quite this turnaround. We knew there was going to be a battle for the final positions in the overall classification, and for a lot of riders it was the last chance to really make up big chunks of time. Cadel Evans has taken the advantage of that this afternoon by getting himself into that early breakaway. and then inspired the move he made, I have to say, Phil, on the slopes of the Col de l'Aubisque. As we see, these are the two chasers. These guys are in 5th and 6th position on the road. That's Jorg Ludwig at the front in the Domino Vacanzi colours. Behind him, Marco Serrano for Liberty Seguros. Liberty Seguros not really having a lot to shout about out of this year's Tour.
No, they're not, but look at the fine tempo riding there from the Domino Vacanzi rider who's first over the top of the Marie Blanc. Well, up there in that breakaway is, in fact, Cadel Evans. They don't win too many stages. I think I can name them. Robbie McEwen, Stuart O'Grady, Baden Cook, Bradley McGee, Neil Stevens, Phil Anderson have all won stage of the Tour de France. Anderson was the man for the overall. McGee's worn the yellow jersey as well as Phil Anderson, so too as O'Grady and Robbie McEwen these days. But this man could be pushing himself up into the top 5 overall if this race can stay just like it is.
Well, if you just look at that, there is a certain amount of panic at the front end of the group. Not on the Team Discovery Channel, because they're the team who are actually in the driving seat. They've got the biggest advantage over everybody, with Lance Armstrong starting the day 2:46 ahead of Basso, around about 6 minutes ahead of Jan Ullrich. So he's got a little bit of tactical time to play with.
Information from Domino Vacanzi. Oh, and a drink for Jorg Ludwig. Still a little time to go to catch up for those two. But it's certainly looking now as though the 4 leaders might hold off the rest for at least the sprint finish. Just slipping to the back, and this is poor old Andrei Kashikin here from Kazakhstan. He had a nasty slap in the face from one of the balloons, these long tubes they give out to the crowd. I think it was an accident on the climb of the Marie Blanc, but it certainly hurt him, and his nose was pouring blood. Well, let's hope it's not broken, but he seems to be having a lot of visits to the back now. Let's have a look then as we see. I think we can see that instant again, you know, because the rider's there. Very, very unfortunate. And those tubes, well, they're nice and long, but, you know, when they smash you in the face, they must really sting. He's done well to pull himself round that. He's having a chat here at the back with Axel Merckx, who's also got himself integrated back into the peloton. And it looks as though Serrano here, he's also having a bit of a rest right now. We'll take a break, come back to us very shortly. Welcome back. These are the fans. Way to go, George. George who? Oh, Hincapie, right. He's in the breakaway. Lance Armstrong on the right there. Getting a bit thin on top these days. Listen to them. They're having a great time at the finishing line, I can tell you right now. As we're going back out down the road by about 20 miles to the race coming towards us. And the big coup of the day, this could be a sensation by Cadel Evans, slipping into this breakaway all day. And if he gains big time, could be a top 6 contender by the end of it. You see, all is not lost in this Tour de France. There's still an awful lot to race for. This is the second group on the road. Fletcher, Serrano, Vassar, Geslam, Pinot, Gilbert, Ludwig and Turpin. They're the ones, the original breakaway of the day. They haven't got caught yet. Only Freddy Rodriguez was picked up by the Lance Armstrong bunch as we now race towards the end of a tough day. All right, well, as we look at the peloton now, still being charged along by Gerolsteiner, T-Mobile and Rabobank, let's have a look at our Crestor 3-day forecast. Great day tomorrow all round. Flat roads, blue skies and 83 degrees. We'll have a wonderful day in the Tour de France tomorrow. Stage 18 gets a little bit rough again. We climb up to Mons, another day for Lance Armstrong perhaps. And then on stage 19, the undulations as we cross through the central massif of France, 75 degrees and cooling as we're racing towards the weekend and, of course, the crucial time trial on Saturday. That's our Crestor forecast. As we now get back to the peloton here, Stefano Garzelli, 111. Well, it's all down to the teammates who have still got legs of Rabobank, Gerolsteiner and T-Mobile to try and reduce this advantage of Cadel Evans in particular. I think half the world want Pereiro to win. He carries the red number there, the most aggressive rider to the Plat d'Aix on Sunday, but didn't get the win. Hincapie did. He's at it again, Pereiro. I don't know how many times he's been on the attack this Tour, Paul, but not one time has it resulted in a win for him yet.
He's been very aggressive. He's looked for the moves on a number of occasions and mostly on the big mountain stages. Let's not forget, this guy is a very talented athlete. He finished 10th overall in the Tour de France last year, having lost 5.5 minutes in the team time trial. He battled his way back up through the field. And this year, at the start of the Tour, he was one of the 3 leaders of Team Phonak alongside Santiago Botero, who was actually having a very bad day here in the Tour, and of course Floyd Landis, who's currently in 7th place in the overall standings.
Well, at the moment, if it were to end right now, Cadel Evans will be sitting in 6th place overall in the Tour de France, displacing Levi Leipheimer by just a few seconds. And that is why Leipheimer's Gerolsteiner team are starting to ride at the front of the peloton, because take off another couple of minutes and we're looking at less than a minute, in fact, and we'll be challenging Jan Ulrich's time, and that's 4th place overall.
And that's why there's major panic on board in the yellow jersey group, and the panic is not coming from Lance Armstrong. He's not too worried at all, but it is coming on board for most of the other riders in front of Cadel Evans in the overall classification. They've brought it back a fraction, but not all that much, because between the leading group of 4 and the main field, there is a 6-minute difference, and this group is caught halfway across at 2 minutes and 12 seconds.
Well, this is the in-between group still working together. Ludovic Turpin is the rider at the back. He had a puncture when he was in the original break on the Marie Blanc, and he actually caught them up again. He paid for it a little later on the Obisque, but there he is. And he looks as though he's really suffering right now, but he's still there. And he's only got about 15 miles to go, which is 24 kilometres.
Cedric Vasseur in there as well. You can see the rider from Cofidis, a former wearer of the yellow jersey in the Tour de France, and of course a man who has seen great glory on the roads of the Tour de France.
Look at this now. T-Mobile having to chase now to save Ulrich's 4th place from Cadel Evans. And the determination here, this is Peter Weening. They're also trying to make sure they don't start to threaten the whereabouts of Michael Rasmussen, the Rabobank rider, in 3rd place. This is a big surprise today, and Lance Armstrong is taking full advantage because he can drop behind and let others do the work. They're giving him a free ride to the finish in Pau. What a way to spend your last day in the Pyrenees. Other people doing the work. That will be the next kilometres to go banner there, as we watch the 4 leaders racing towards the end. 25 kilometres remain on today's stage of the Tour de France. Looking down from our helicopter today, in the distance you can't quite see around that mountain, but that's where Pau lies, and the group is still chasing those 4 leaders, and right behind the main field of Lance Armstrong still being charged along by the riders of Rabobank, Gerolsteiner and T-Mobile, because Cadel Evans in that breakaway is now beginning to threaten the top 5 riders in the Tour de France. That's a long line down there. They're no longer cantering through the mountains of the Pyrenees on the flatter roads now heading into Pau. It's a gift for Lance Armstrong and his team, because he's called all his men off the front. As we see here, Gerolsteiner racing for Levi Leipheimer now, trying to stop Cadel Evans going over Leipheimer, who currently is 6th. Peter Weening comes through, trying to stop Cadel Evans reaching Michael Rasmussen, who is 3rd. Then come through the T-Mobile riders. They're trying to stop Cadel reaching Jan Ulrich, who is 4th. Well, this is a terrific day of racing now, and Cadel Evans is the man in that breakaway who matters most to them. The other 3, Xavier Zandio, Oscar Pereiro and Eddie Mazzolini. So there's no peace for the riders right now as they continue to emanate the charge, and time is beginning to run out. All right, well, we're watching the ride of a lifetime. OLN's exclusive coverage, though, of the 2005 Tour will continue tomorrow with stage 17. It could be a day for the sprinters, then again it might not be. We'll bring it you live anyway tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. I beg your pardon, up early again, Eastern Time. Our expanded primetime coverage will come as usual, 8 Eastern and 9 Pacific. And it could be another great day of racing, because this Tour continues to race to Paris at record speeds. And these are the riders trying to keep that record up today as they scorch along the road towards Pau. Oscar Pereira wearing the red number as the most aggressive rider of the last time he raced, which was Sunday in the Tour de France, when he finished 2nd to Hincapie at the top of the Plat d'Aix. Let me tell you, by the way, the crowds it took to come off the top of the Plat d'Aix There's 7 hours that was left of that day, all of the night, and they were still coming off when we drove away from the bottom the next morning at 9 a.m. It was still a traffic jam.
Well, reputedly, there were 500,000 people watching that race in the last 15 kilometres. That really is pretty remarkable. This is the main field going through the 25-kilometre to-go point, and they are, Phil, stretched out into a very long line. I think the alarm bells are ringing for 1 or 2 riders who've defended their position in the overall standings over the last couple of days, and can see the man on the front there, Cadel Evans, knocking them off.
Well, at the moment, they've closed in ever so slightly. Cadel Evans is now only into 7th place, still ahead of Floyd Landis, so the chase is having some effect. But time is running out. 21 kilometres to go to the finish, and as you can see now, these riders, 3 different teams. Well, there's 4 actually, because the Credit Agricole rider down there is also helping out. Our monitors today, our computer telling us Sebastian Eno's heart rate currently at 162 beats per minute and riding at 50 kilometers an hour, while Jörg Ludwig, who's in the chasing group, he's riding only at 43 kilometers an hour at 153 beats to the minute. That's on our computer here.
Well, the pressure is certainly on in the peloton, and that's because of the presence of a man by the name of Cadel Evans from Australia in that leading group of 4 riders, who today is trying to move himself into the top 10 in the overall classification. It is a great move by Cadel Evans, and he's been joined by 4 very tough bike riders. But if we had to pick a winner, Phil, from this leading group of 4, it would be very hard to do, because the man at the back there, Zandier, hasn't won a race in his career. Pereira on the right-hand side is not a great winner. He's actually only won 4 races in his career. Cadel Evans, from the leading quartet, is the man who has been the most successful since he turned professional. So I'd like to think that he's got a very good crack at taking the win.
Well, it's going to be a sprint, I would think, between the 4 of them, and it's a tortuous approach, and it's not flat as they run in through the city of Po. The actual finish line is on the flat, but there's a lovely springboard before you get there. We'll see what happens. We're not far from the finish now. There's one small climb to come, and they're on it at the moment. A small climb, and they top it, leaves them inside 20 kilometers to race to the finish. Cadel, you see, wants time, and he's working as hard as he can to get it here. This is the best chance he has had probably in his life to really progress in his first Tour de France. Well, as we look at the action now, let's have a look at our famous Lance 25, brought to you by BMW. And this is our number 6.
The CAT scan revealed that my condition has spread into my abdomen.
Well, those are the words which stunned at the sporting world. Lance announcing he did have testicular cancer and was giving up the bike to fight the disease with the same spirit he has ridden his bicycle races. The rest, they say, is history. He went through the worst moments of his life, and he's come back to the happiest moments of his life. And that's our BMW number 6. Now, we've asked you to vote for the top 5. Get on to olntv.com and do so, because from tomorrow we'll show you those top 5. Back now with the leaders on today's stage of the Tour de France. And we're now on the final climb today. 4th category, Côte de Padier Pietà, 2.6 kilometers. A mere 4th category, but it still hurts the legs at this stage of the game. Once we're over the top, just 19.5 kilometers to run, about 11.5 miles to the finish. These 4 are not going to be caught. I feel safe in saying that. But how much time will they have over the chase? And for Cadel Evans, that is equally as crucial, I think. This is Eddie Mazzolini. Little bridge on his nose there to keep his nostrils flared, to get in as much air as possible. This is Cadel Evans, the man with the most to gain. Mind you, Mazzolini's got a fair bit to gain. He's 14th in this race. He could also find himself with a 4-minute advantage, moving up into the top 12. So there's a lot to gain here today. The Basque flag there. Pereira, the only Spanish rider. Well, there's 2, I beg your pardon. There's 2 Spanish riders, and I think one is a Basque. The rider sitting at the back, Xavier Zandio. So they couldn't produce the goods in the mountains. Maybe we'll have a surprise today on the flatter road into Po. Look at the crowd here on the final hill of the day. Pereira making the pace, followed by Cadel Evans. He never drops back now. He's so anxious to keep the momentum up. Now, what's Eddie Mazzolini? I was going for a drink.
I was a little bit worried there because his Lamprey team has only got 5 men left in it. Another one went out today, Jean-Luc Bortolon, who didn't start, and neither did the heaviest man in the race, the big Swede, Maggie Backstead from Liquigas. He also never started. There's the top of the climb. Pereiro grabbing the prize at the top, followed over by Cadel Evans. So now it's all down to the finish, and how long will it take them to do the last 19.5 kilometers? Because they've really got to go for this now, and Cadel Evans knows it better than anybody else. This is a big moment for Cadel, and he's going to make the most of it, I'm sure of that. There's Cadel reaching for a drink, and then he's back to business. So we'll just take a break, and then we'll be back with the Tour de France, heading for home in Pau today. See you in a moment. We're back with the Tour de France, just over the top of the last little climb. This is Philippe Gilbert. He's just sprinted off the front of the chase group over the climb in a desperate effort to try and bridge alone to the 4 leaders. Not sure it's a great idea. Juan Antonio Fletcher is after him, and so too is Jörg Ludwig, and then the rest of the breakaway. But he has got a lot of gap at the moment. They ignored him completely when he jumped. He's trying now to bridge a gap of 1 minute and 40 seconds. So that's a long ask at the moment. He's inside 19 kilometers from the finish. But Française des Jeux, they came in this race with high hopes, especially with Baden Cook and Bradley McGee, the 2 Australians. And frankly, they haven't had the tour that they wanted. Neither rider's enjoying themselves that much at all. And Philippe Gilbert is a Belgian, he's a good climber, and he's also a great prospect for the future, as you can see at the moment. 2 hours, 5 minutes behind Lance Armstrong. I don't think Lance will be chasing him right now. All right, well, we're talking about Lance Armstrong as he comes away from the Pyrenees for the last time. He has been an inspiration to us all. OLN is saying thank you to Lance, and we'd like you to as well. And you can do that by coming on to olntv.com and give Lance a big thank you for what looks like being 7 victories in the Tour de France and being an incredible storyline since he turned pro in 1992. Now let's have a look at this. This is the bike of Armstrong today, and I'm going to quickly tell you what all these decals mean. 2 stage win number 2, a stage 10 winner Otakam. Raindrop, it was wet, snowflake and cold. An arrow put him in the yellow jersey, and the tall mountain bit there on the right, a very difficult stage. Boy, I managed to get all that out and remember it. This is the main field now, coming over the top of the last climb of the day. Only the boys at the front, a handful of them, are interested in the breakaway. Lance certainly isn't, and the gap is coming down. About 4.5 minutes now. As we look down to the road, twisting and turning, as we leave the beauty of the hills and head for the metropolis of Pau. Paul, the chase is working. The gap is now down to 4:28.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to come down before the finish, though, because those 4 leaders really are doing an excellent job. They've got around about 1:42 over Philippe Gilbert, and Philippe Gilbert is not that far off the front of the rest of the group. These, though, final 20 kilometers are very difficult roads. They're undulating. There's hardly an ounce of flat until they actually get into the outskirts of Pau for the last 6.5 kilometers. So there's a lot of pain still to be had on the roads of the Tour this afternoon.
Cadel Evans still sits in 7th place in the Tour de France at the moment as he continues to race towards the line. He cannot start thinking about winning the stage. He wants time for a top 10 position in the Tour. He has got to continue to drive, and that may damage the chances of a stage win. Pereiro, and look at the pressure they put on here. Cadel Evans is so full of fight today as he goes under the 15 to go, and Mazzolini recognised it quickly enough. They can't allow Cadel an inch now. This man is on fire.
He is on fire. He was the man who attacked on the slopes of the Col de l'Aubis to go into the lone lead initially. Then he was joined on the descent by the man in 3rd place there, Oscar Pereiro. Then all of a sudden the man in the dark blue jersey of Lamprey, Eddie Mazzolini, came back. And we had never even thought about Zandier of Il Baleares coming back, but I think that was actually an advantage. This 4-man leading group has certainly worked very well together.
Now this is Philippe Gilbert, and he's being caught now, and coming up behind him there is Jörg Ludwig, and the other rider, I can't remember who it was, who went away at the moment. It's the Boyga Telecom. It could be Jeslan.
Well, this is another move here, a complete and utter change there as we get a chance to see Gilbert.
And Jeslan's come up with Ludwig at the moment, so there's 3 now.
It's Pinot, actually, Jérôme Pinot, and I think the other rider coming across was Cédric Vasseur. Just caught the red, white and blue of the Cofidis jersey. This is a good move, and this is a difficult, very hard rolling running towards the line. In fact, Pino's decided he wants to go over the top, and he's tried to lift it. Looks across to see if there's going to be any response here from Gilbert, and there isn't much response. There's not a lot left in the engine room at this moment.
What's the point of attacking each other here? They're not going to reach them on their own, I don't think. They've got to try and get together. So if they're weak on the climb, wait, and then start to use strength on the other side.
Well, that would be the most sensible tactic. You need at least 3 or 4 riders to try and make any dent into that advantage of the 4 leaders at all. There's nobody, unless his name is Armstrong or Eddie Merckx, going to ride across a 2-minute gap on their own at this stage of the race.
Well, they're under 15 to go now, and the gap of 15 kilometres, 1 minute and 40 from the 4 chasers for this chasing group. This is the leading group now, and down there the roads look a little bit wet, but in fact it is melting tar here as we start the descent towards the finishing line. We'll take a break. 13 kilometres to go. These are the 4 men who've made history today in many ways. First over the top of the Obisque was Cadel Evans, and he's been joined since then by Eddie Mazzolini, Xavier Zagno, Oscar Pereiro. Pereiro driving just now at the front. And then comes the other Spanish rider in the breakaway, Zandio. The only other member of his team to win a stage this time was Alejandro Valverde when he outsprinted Lance Armstrong. Of course, Courchevel no longer in the race, of course. And they're looking for a second stage win here. There are still 11 teams in the Tour de France who have not won a stage this year. And Evans is just driving on here because he's looking for time that will give him a top 10 overall position in the Tour de France. Well, once this exciting stage is over, up next will be avalanche dogs. When an avalanche hits, the mountain roads are a danger zone. To prevent disaster, rescue dog handler Scott Aiken with Dog Decker have the job of seek and destroy. Detonate the snow before it finds a way off the mountain of its own. It's OLN's original series, Avalanche Dogs, and that's up next, immediately after this coverage of the Tour de France. A drink and end of bottle there for the most aggressive rider of 2 days ago, Oscar Pereiro. And Evans is still in a top 10 position at the minute. Just waiting for the next time check, but I think Cadel at this minute still sits in 7th overall. He's endangered the position of Floyd Landis. Hasn't quite got up to Levi Leipheimer because the team has been chasing. At one stage he was up to 5th, and he's holding 7th right now. This has been a terrific day for him.
Been a brilliant day for the man who started his career as a very good mountain biker, winner of the World Cup in the mountain bike, and decided in 2001 that he wanted to try road racing, and he's done that to great success, winning the Tour of Austria on a couple of occasions, wearing the pink jersey in the Tour de France. He's got to think now, Phil, as to whether or not he wants to try and get himself the stage win, or whether he throws all of his chances away and tries to get as much time as possible on the run in towards the finish, because if those 4 leaders start to play tactical games, he could see a huge chunk of the 4.5-minute advantage over the main field disappear in the last 3 or 4 kilometres.
Well, the riders now are just over 9 kilometres to go, and it's all pretty fast riding now. The chasers behind are within just 2 minutes of them, and the peloton continue to close the gap. And now 4 minutes and 19 seconds, so they are coming back. They'll never come back before the finish. Cadel Evans is gaining time today, and will he win the stage? But I think this is going to be a most interesting run for the stage. You know the finish in Depot as well as anyone, Paul. It's not an easy approach.
It's not an easy approach, and it's a very long sprint. It's down a narrow road. They've got to actually come through the streets of Pau for around about 6 kilometres. But it's a slightly different finish to normal. We take a larger circuit around the city, and they've got a straight of around about 650 metres, so they will see the finish. Theoretically, Cadel Evans is the best finisher of all these riders. None of the riders in the leading group of 4 are great sprinters, so Cadel has got a great chance of getting himself a stage win.
Well, it's not long before we'll see that sprint and see what it's like. This is the leading group. Fletcher now trying to get this group up, so too Cedric Vasseur. They're closing, but are they closing quick enough? Time running out. Philippe Gilbert was the man who went on the offensive on the last climb, and Jérôme Pinault all caught up with him. So to Jörg Ludwig.
So that's the chase. These are the 4 men going for home. When we come back, we'll take them to the finish and pick a winner. Well, we're looking at the pictures of the main field here in the Tour de France as they run inside. The last 10 kilometers to go, 9 for them. Andries Kloden finished second in this race last year. Hasn't been that kind of a man this time around, but he's still been useful to Jan Ullrich. And now Ulrich's safe again in his 4th position because they are closing in on the breakaway of 4. Not quick enough to catch them. Here's Jaroslav Popovic. He'll keep his white jersey to wear another day as well. Lance Armstrong, he'll certainly keep yellow to wear another day too, as he continues in safe formation here towards the finish. Cadel Evans still looking to gain possibly a place in the top 7. Well, this is Jan Ullrich. At least his 4th place is safe. But, you know, the last gap we've got is 3:48. They're inside 4 minutes now behind the 4 leaders. They're going to fight out the finish in Po, and Cadel Evans is going to be in the top 10 tonight. He started 11th, and he could well be in the top 8.
Could very well be in the top 8, but right now, as he goes inside of 5 kilometers to go, he's got to get the thinking head on, Phil, because he is the fastest finisher from this leading group of 4. It's going to be a very strange finish because none of these men are great winners in the sport. They're riders who are capable of riding high in the overall classification of the Grand Tours, like Eddie Mazzolini. We've seen Eddie Mazzolini many, many times in races like the Giro d'Italia. But Eddie Mazzolini, as much as we've talked about him on television over the last 5 or 6 years, has actually only ever won 2 races in his career.
But he's such a great bike rider, and he's never far away from the win. And today, he might well take the stage because he can pack a finish. These guys are not pure sprinters, any of them. It could be an interesting finish when they come round. This is Cadel Evans. He's still giving most of the effort here. Has to, because he is the man with the biggest time gain wanted. And he's driving whenever he senses a slackening of the pace.
Well, what a win it would be for the man in 2nd place there, Eddie Mazzolini. You know, he has only won 2 races in his career, Phil, but he's been a professional since 1995, and he'll be thinking this is the big bonus. This is the big opportunity that very few professional bike riders ever get, to be in a winning breakaway at the Tour. We see in the early part of the race, like the Tour de France, the breakaways go out early on, they get caught down towards the end, but it's in the latter part of the Tour that these breakaways succeed. And if you can get into the good train, then you've got a great chance of taking a glorious victory. And the victory will go to one of these riders, but it's still a big question mark as to which one is going to get the win. Watch out from the man from Il Baleares at the back there. Never won a race in his career since he turned pro in 2000. He might cause the big surprise. If I was him, I'd wait till around about 1 kilometer to go, and I'd try and jump them.
Well, we're inside 4 now. We're in Po. That's the casino here in Po. And this what used to be part of the old motor racing circuit now. They don't have motor car racing here in Po anymore. Cars got too fast for the twists and turns of the natural road circuit. But these riders aren't going quite that quick. 5 kilometers to go now for the chase group. And they're at 1 minute 57 still. So they're actually riding at exactly the same speed for the last 5 kilometers as the 4 front runners.
But the peloton is still edging that little bit closer. The peloton is only 1.5 minutes behind that 8-man group, and 3.5 minutes behind the leading group of 4 containing Cadel Evans. This is a slight climb up into the town. Po is split into 2 levels. You've got the bottom part of the town, which is along the river. Then the top part where the finish line is, where we are waiting for the riders to come in. This would be an ideal point here for somebody to go out and try and launch an attack, but they're all pretty tired.
These are the 4 leaders. We are 3 kilometers from the finish, more or less, and they are clear. Just on 2 minutes the gap now, back to the chasers, and then the peloton are about 3.5. They're never going to catch these 4, and Cadel Evans, who continues to drive here to gain time at 3 kilometers, because he is now putting himself probably in the top 8 of the Tour de France.
Phil, I have a feeling here that looking at Cadel Evans, he's actually sacrificing his chance of winning the stage here this afternoon, because he is doing so much work to try and conserve a maximum of that advantage he has over the peloton. This is the group behind, another move going. It looks like, I think that was Jörg Ludovic who jumped off the front of the group there as we come up to 4 kilometers to go to the 2nd group on the road.
Well, Gilbert has gone after him again as they go under 4 kilometers to go. It's a little drag this. It's quite a painful drag when you're riding at these sort of speeds as well. And so they're trying to get away. This is their last chance to get away on the climbs.
After that, it is Ludwig. After that, and his Pinot has gone with him. And Gilbert hanging on. But I think the group is coming back to them. That's the problem.
Cadel Evans on the front of this group is absolutely burying himself here, Phil. He has done the last 2 kilometres on the front. He has not asked for help from anybody. He's trying to conserve as much of the 3.5 minutes that he's got left because he knows that can move him into the top 10 in the overall standings at the Tour de France, and that's what he wants to do this afternoon. Mazzolini is sitting comfortably in second place. Old Oscar Pereira there in the green and yellow shorts must feel those fibres twitching in his legs. He's been close to the victory just only 48 hours ago at the summit of the climb up to Pla d'Adet as we go further back down the road. This is Gilbert and Ludovic who've managed to get off the front, but this is not the race we're interested in. We're more interested in the race at the front between the 4 men who are fighting out the stage.
Well, Pereiro is in the break. Jeslan, Gilbert, Ludwig are these 3, but they're racing for 5th position. Pereiro there carries a red number on his back because he was the man who finished second to George Hincapie at Pla d'Adet. Very annoyed with Hincapie and his tactics, sat behind him for the whole day, ran round him for the stage win. And the team was unhappy about that, and they told Discovery Channel so, but that's the law of the jungle. Now he's got another chance of winning the stage, and he's done a lot of work here. Remember, he was in the lead on the descent of the Obis when a flat tyre put him back into this group, and that's the way it stayed. Cadel Evans has different fish to fry here. If he gets just more than a 3-minute advantage over the bunch, then he will go into 8th place in the Tour de France.
He's looking at 8th or 9th place overall this evening as he goes inside the banner, indicating 1 kilometre to go. And I would have to say, Cadel, you need to swing off the front here right now if you want to try and win the stage. But I think he's thrown everything away. He's thrown complete and utter caution to the wind.
So as they go towards the line now, they're heading around the square here. Cadel Evans, he has to do this. It will cost him a stage win. Look at his face. Every second counts. He wants a top 10 finish in the Tour in his first ever Tour de France. At the moment, he's sitting on 9th or 8th place. He's no choice but to drive, and the others are saying, great, then we'll take him on in the sprint. Mazzolini's never won a stage in this race. Pereiro hasn't. Neither, of course, is Zandio, because Zandio's riding his first Tour as well. This is going to be open for grabs now, and Cadel Evans is giving some tremendous effort to the line.
This is the biggest lead out I've ever seen. He's led these riders out for about 3 kilometres. Pereiro's going, and now Eddie Mazzolini's kicking too.
Well, Mazzolini's taken on Pereiro. I think we all want Pereiro to win. He's been a great rider. When you get beaten by Hincapie 48 hours ago, this time you get the win. Oscar Pereiro really stuck to his guns and finally gets first place.
Well, I have to take my hat off there to Oscar Pereira because he has attacked I don't know how many times since the start of the Tour de France, and finally Team Phonak have got what they wanted, that big victory. This is the next group on the road, but Phil, what a great ride by Cadel Evans. He threw away any chance at all of winning the stage here this afternoon because he wanted to climb up into top 10 in the overall classification, and I wonder if he'll apologise, Oscar Pereira, for sitting on Cadel Evans for the last 3 kilometres.
Indeed, indeed. Well, there is Pereiro as he gets taken away for first place. Evans will find out where he sits tonight in the Tour de France. It depends on the time as he counts down now. There's Freddie giving her a big hug there. At last they've got a victory and their first one of the team in this year's Tour.
Well, I tell you what, Phil, we talked a little earlier about the law of the jungle, and yesterday or 2 days ago, George Hincapie didn't work too hard in the breakaway and got himself the win at the end of the day. Over around about the last 5 kilometres of that race, Oscar Pereira did exactly the same tactic. Sat at the back, allowed Cadel Evans to do all of the pacemaking, and he was not going to complain at all. And he whipped by him in the final.
It was very important he got that win. So there are now only 10 teams in the Tour de France who have not won a stage. The clock is saying 1 minute 23 at the moment and counting. He needs to be just over 3 minutes to climb up into 8th place overall, Cadel Evans. He's watching, believe me. This is Philippe Gilbert bringing home the group, also containing the 2 guys from Bouygues Telecom.
He's looking at 5th place there, Philippe Gilbert, and it's another amazing turnaround in the Tour de France because Gilbert is definitely not a climber. He's a man for the flatlands and the sprints, but he's going to get himself 5th place on a mountain stage of the Tour de France, and he will be very happy with that. Leading up to the line, you can see Boyke Telecom, Jorgen Ludwig is there. I think the man who'll get the sprint from this group is very likely to be Juan Antonio Fletcher.
Well, one important finish is this for Gilbert. It's hurting him and he's trying desperately to make the line, but they're coming at him. Cedric Vasseur, and followed by Juan Antonio Fletcher. Gilbert should do it. He's been pretty aggressive out on that course. He's been the break all day as well. The breakaway going at 19 kilometres. It's not over yet, Philippe, because here comes Jorgen Ludwig and Vasseur. He just gets over the line, 5th for him, and it would be, I think it was Geslin taking 6th in the end as well.
What's important now, though, is to look at the clock for Cadel Evans to see just exactly what the time gap is going to be back to that group containing the majority of the favourites, and here they are heading up towards the line. The clock is 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Well, if it comes in at around about the 3-minute mark, then Cadel Evans is going to find himself in 9th place tonight.
But if it gets any better, he'll go that little bit higher. Cadel Evans sitting off the race lead by 12:57, less what we're seeing on the screen at the moment. And it's desperate finishing now by the peloton as they head up to the line. We're looking now at the 2 riders here from Leaky Gas as they start the spin. It's over 3, and it's looking very, very good now. This is Fedrigo, who is the champion of France, finishing off the peloton. Desperate moments. Laurent Brochard taking him on there, and it's Brochard who just gets it on the line there, I think it was, as he and lands safely in the group. Brochard beating there in the sprint Franco Pelazzotti. So the gap is around about 3 minutes, which for Cadel Evans should put him up into 7th place tonight in the Tour de France. Well, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll shake down the classification, we'll grab Lance Armstrong, and we'll finish off for you here. Come back and join us shortly.